At this year's Tet, or Lunar New Year celebration in New Orleans East, connections to Vietnam and the war which became synonymous with that country were very visible. Many here are Vietnamese refugees. Their children and grandchildren later became first-generation Americans. For those touched by the Vietnam War, a festival like this can be a reminder of the passage of time. The end of April marks 50 years since the end of the war.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah, hard to imagine. Time passes fast, no doubt.
Robert Collins came to this festival to experience some of the Vietnamese culture that has seeped into New Orleans. He was a teenager during the controversial war, which involved America sending troops to South Vietnam with the goal of stopping North Vietnamese communist forces.
I had a couple of cousins that died in the war, and I know it was a very political war, no doubt about that, and the veterans from the war sure didn't get the recognition they needed.
I never even understood why we went.
Charlene Ellender is a New Orleans native.
That's just me in my different uniforms. That's right before I went. That's in San Antonio at Basic.
She studied nursing in college and enlisted in the Army. 6 months before graduation in 1968, she was commissioned as an officer. Shortly after, she got orders to head to Vietnam, a place Ellender admits she knew very little about.
I'm going to tell you, I was ignorant to what went on and anything about the war. He's my medic. They were from North Dakota.
By 1969, she was 22 years old and in Vietnam, a first lieutenant working with the 44th Medical Brigade.
And I served in 69, 70 at the 12th Tobacco Hospital in Cu Chi, South Vietnam.
Ellender says she knew she would witness pain and suffering, but it was often hard to stomach.
My first assignment was the emergency room. Everybody had to go through the emergency room. That was an eye-opener.
Ellender's second assignment was in the triage unit.
That's when I found out when those that were hopeless were put behind a curtain with a nurse to keep them comfortable and just let them go peacefully. That was hard.
The second night I was in Vietnam, my squad was attacked, and I lost one guy. He had his stomach blown open by a grenade.
Ellis Johnson is also from New Orleans. In 1964, at the age of 21, he began the first of 2 tours of duty in Vietnam with the U.S. Marines. Like Ellender, Johnson says he didn't know much about where he was headed. When you got there, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were do everything within my power to keep my other Marines safe. Because like I said, I was a squad leader and I was responsible for 12 people.
In Vietnam, Johnson says he had daily conversations with God.
I would pray to God all the time. God, you didn't put me over here to die in Vietnam. I would say that just about every day.
During his second tour, Johnson says a member of his squadron stepped on a landmine while on patrol. He says the blast knocked him out. When he regained consciousness, Johnson says his team was under fire.
It said the explosion flipped me over and went into my chest. And all I know when I woke up, bullets was bouncing around me. So I knew right away, don't move. I just stayed there. This was, my whole arm was blown open. You could see the bone. When I looked at it, you could see the bone, and they sewed this up. My chest. Matter of fact, I had a piece of shrapnel in my chest just came out a couple of years ago.
Johnson was awarded a Purple Heart for his wounds. He left Vietnam in 1966. Ellender finished her deployment in 1970. The two are among the more than 2.5 million uniformed Americans who served in Vietnam between 1964 and 1975. More than 58,000 U.S. servicemen and women lost their lives in the war, 885 from Louisiana. Their names etched into history and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Known simply as the Wall, it's a tribute to the American lives lost. The conflict came to an end when North Vietnam seized control of Saigon, the southern capital of Vietnam. American troops pulled out of the city on April 30th, 1975.
I guess I was sort of heartbroken that we gave in. I heard that if we had just stayed a little longer, that we would have won.
Was that a winnable war?
No, because you're fighting people in their backyard.
It's our first failure, our first true failure as a nation militarily and in nation building. It was, I think, a very a noble experiment. I think it was done with good intentions all around, but at the same time, it proved our arrogance.
John Fitzmaurice is a history professor at the University of New Orleans and has taught courses on the Vietnam War. Fitzmaurice says the war caused many Americans to question their own government and its policies. But he says what should never be questioned is the valor of the veterans.
But what was the real tragedy of the soldiers coming home is that they were largely ignored.
The number of Vietnamese casualties is murky. In 1995, Vietnam released its official estimate. 4 million civilians killed countrywide, with 1.1 million Viet Cong soldiers dead. The U.S. military estimates more than 200,000 South Vietnamese troops who fought alongside Americans were killed. This spring, the American flag flew next to the old flag of South Vietnam. As part of its commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, the local Vietnamese community honored both U.S. and South Vietnamese veterans. The war may have ended 50 years ago, but for some veterans, they're fighting a different enemy today.
Didn't really start having any bad dreams initially till the 80s when I got married and my husband told me, "Would you fight the war in your sleep?"
I try not to think about Vietnam on a regular basis. Sometimes my mind is not thinking about Vietnam and boom, something will happen.
Johnson and Ellender say they're unsure what was gained in the war, but the losses are undeniable.
When I saw the way Saigon had fallen, I said that was a wasted war. I said, what did we die for? What did I bleed for?
A wasted war. Wasted lives.
This is his family, the Bynums.
Growing up in New Orleans, Saran Bynum says most people assumed she was born and raised here, and she went along.
In New Orleans, people would think I'm Creole, so I just say, okay, I'm Creole, I'm black, I'm black.
During carnival season, you can find her dancing and parading in her baby doll costume. She embraces the culture and traditions of New Orleans. But it was only a few years ago that Bynum began revealing another side of herself.
So I'm now admitting that I'm half Vietnamese, and that was something I never even shared with anybody.
Can I ask you why?
I was ashamed of how I was born.
Bynum was born in South Vietnam during the war that divided a country, but also brought her parents together.
I am half African American and half Vietnamese. My biological father was a war veteran. Having a relationship with an American soldier was very dangerous. A lot of the Vietnamese women either kept their child and hid in secrecy so that they won't get caught. In my situation, I was abandoned.
This is Bynum at an orphanage in the old South Vietnamese capital of Saigon, before it fell under communist control in 1975. The fall of Saigon set off an exodus, sending thousands of Vietnamese refugees scrambling to leave their country. Bynum was one of thousands who eventually came to southeast Louisiana.
I'm Cindy Nguyen. I came to New Orleans in 1975.
I'm Kim Nguyen. I came in 1984.
And I came to New Orleans October 26, 1975.
Vinh Tran was only 5 when he and his family escaped Vietnam. Like countless other Vietnamese refugees, the family left by boat with nothing more than the clothes on their back and hope in their hearts.
So my dad just headed out, didn't know where to go. So after 2 days, we saw a march, so we climbed up there. For the next 2 days, cargo ships start to come by and pick it up.
We escaped via boat, so we're the boat people. And that journey was quite long. That I remember. I also remember starving and being hungry.
Cindy Nguyen says her family's boat somehow made it to Guam and eventually to the U.S. Other refugees were not as fortunate. The United Nations estimates between 200,000 and 400,000 so-called boat people died or disappeared at sea.
I feel blessed. I feel that God has a purpose for me to be here.
Bynum was among more than 3,000 orphaned babies and kids evacuated out of Saigon on massive cargo planes in the U.S.-led Operation Baby Lift. Bynum was eventually adopted by Horace Bynum and Dr. Eunice Hodges of New Orleans.
This is old school.
Bynum says early on, her adoptive parents were all that she knew and needed.
I came in when I was 3 years old. I didn't know how to walk and I didn't speak any English, so I had to learn everything from scratch.
When the Archdiocese of New Orleans and Catholic Charities began resettling Vietnamese refugees in the metro area in the late 1970s, they soon found similarities to their old country.
The climate and the surrounding, the environment mimic what in Vietnam.
Hot and swampy.
It's swampy.
They also found a source of income, fishing, a job that didn't necessarily require language skills.
Why did your family choose New Orleans, do you think?
Probably fishing, shrimping. It was easier for them to get jobs. And most of
That's
our
what
family
they
members,
knew.
yeah.
That's all they knew in Vietnam.
Most of our
That's
families,
what they did.
Yeah, most of our families are like my parents grew up in a fishing village, so I think that simulation is a lot easier.
So we're from Phúc Tỉnh. My father is a fisherman by trade.
After first settling in Iowa, Cindy Wynn says her parents learned of the opportunities in New Orleans. So they headed south.
They heard that Vietnamese people were going to New Orleans and that New Orleans weather is just like Vietnam. And so, of course, my father got excited. I think for him was he got excited that he could actually work to take care of his family.
As their numbers grew, the refugees carved out pockets on the west bank of the Mississippi River and in New Orleans East, where Mary Queen of Vietnam Church would become the heart of their neighborhood. Vinh Tran is now the parish's deacon.
And you know how Vietnamese are? They tend to live around the church. The church was the first building that built in this land, and then all the house here.
50 years after the end of the war, census data shows the Vietnamese population in the New Orleans metro area tops 19,000, with more than half living in Jefferson Parish. While decades have passed, some refugees like Saran Bynum are still exploring difficult questions from the past. She's been on a journey to find her biological parents.
I was content with my adoptive parents, but at the same time, I was angry because, I thought I was abandoned. I thought I was left behind.
With her mom's encouragement, Bynum set out to find answers.
My mother, she pushed me to take the DNA, and she supported, my search. She said, hey, it's time for you to find out who your biological family is.
A few years ago, she found a possible link to her biological father's family. It was a man in Memphis, Tennessee. She reached out to him, asking him to submit DNA.
He confirmed that he was my brother and his father is Charles Weston. This is my biological father. His name is Charles Weston, and he served in the Army in Vietnam.
What was that moment like, finding your father, realizing you finally located him after all these years?
It was surreal. I never thought in a million years I would be able to find him.
Bynum found her father, but never got to meet him. Charles Wesson passed away in 2016.
This is Torbjorn. We call him Toby.
Bynum's search uncovered another Lara family. In 2022, her new relatives came to New Orleans to meet her for the first time on her birthday.
That was the best year of my life. Like, I never in my wildest dreams think that I would find him.
And to find a piece of you, really.
And to find a piece of me, and that right there meant I had a sense of belonging finally.
There's still a missing piece, though, her birth mother.
I don't know if she's moved on or she misses me. And I hope one day before I die I could meet her or see a picture of her just to see what I look like and who I came from. I want to see her so bad just to know that this is my mom.
For all the complexities embedded in the Vietnam War, many of those displaced by it longed for something simple, a sense of belonging. For thousands, they found it here in New Orleans. At Banh Mi Boys on Magazine Street, you have your choice of po' boys or banh mi, which is the Vietnamese word for bread or sandwich. Owner Peter Nguyen is a second-generation Vietnamese American and says his business reflects his upbringing.
Growing up, I got to try both sides, the New Orleans food, the Vietnamese food, and both have big flavors.
Banh Mi Boys opened 10 years ago next to this gas station in Metairie. It's now a franchise with 5 locations. Nguyen says New Orleans is the kind of city where he can take something traditionally Vietnamese and create Southern mashups.
My food is playful, it's fun, it's bright, it's exciting. And yeah, it's just like things that come to my mind and things that I want to create, and you'll see that on my menu.
So you can go there and you can get a traditional New Orleans po' boy, or you can get a traditional banh mi, or you can get both mixed together. And I just think that's amazing.
Chef Michael Galata says he grew up in New Orleans eating banh mi and pho, a traditional Vietnamese beef noodle soup. During dinners with his Vietnamese friends, Galata says he got a glimpse of assimilation in action.
You know, the aunts and the uncles were taking New Orleans dishes and adding Southeast Asian ingredients, right? So making a crawfish etouffee, but adding lemongrass and ginger. And it was just like this aha moment of like, oh my God, like the rich, soulful cuisine of Southeast Louisiana and New Orleans, but then you're adding these bright pops to it that make it so much more interesting. And so, yeah, I just fell in love with that whole idea.
That hybrid of Southeast Louisiana and Southeast Asia is the essence of Mofo, Galata's Mid-City restaurant, which he opened in 2014. Galata's and Nguyen's restaurants are examples of how the influx of Vietnamese refugees affected New Orleans culture. Before the fall of Saigon in 1975, you wouldn't find a place like Banh Mi Boys or Mofo in the city. It's a different food scene now.
It's a fresh take on things, and it's inviting flavors. Some people are, traditionalists, and they're like, oh, that's not authentic, but I've never claimed to be authentic.
New Orleans always gets better because she assimilates, right? We always get better and better cuisine because we don't try to keep them separated. We let them come together, and we find new ways to present them, and we've always done it that way.
The Vietnamese refugee experience also impacted Louisiana's politics. In 2009, Joseph Gao made history when he became the first Vietnamese American to serve in the U.S. Congress. Born in Vietnam, the Republican defeated longtime Democratic incumbent William Jefferson, who was under indictment for bribery and public corruption.
Mr. Gao, being a congressman, one of the 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, is not a small feat. And I realize that he was elected under some interesting circumstances, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he was elected.
In 2017, Cindy Nguyen won a seat on the New Orleans City Council, the first Vietnamese American to do so. Nguyen says election night was special.
I could never forget my father's face.
For one term, Nguyen represented District E, which includes New Orleans East. Long considered the heart of the city's Vietnamese community, it was the place where thousands of refugees settled after escaping Vietnam. Nguyen says her time on the council was special and surreal.
I don't think the community ever thought that we would have a Vietnamese person in office. When I ran, I think there was like just the responsibility of doing right for the community. It's always been that way. And so it definitely was an honor.
Nguyen's improbable story is now on display in 2 exhibitions in New Orleans. This is an artist's interpretation of her in Watai, or Flower Hands, a new exhibit at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art.
Family is really big in this exhibition.
The collection features works by a dozen Vietnamese artists from across the American South. Selena McCain is co-curator of the exhibit and says it offers a different perspective on Vietnam, one that isn't solely focused on the war.
With this exhibition, the artists are kind of walking a very difficult line where they're not only looking back, but they're also looking forward in many ways. And it's a very difficult thing to do, and I think a lot of the artists here, they're doing it in such a nuanced way.
Bradley Summerall is another curator and says the museum saw the 50th anniversary as an opportunity to showcase a segment of artists still emerging.
This is a community that came here with nothing and has only been here for 50 years. So the idea of being an artist was not something that many young Vietnamese Americans had the privilege of dreaming about, but now they do. And now there really is a renaissance of the arts.
Over in the French Quarter, at the historic New Orleans collection, 15,000 negatives.
There's a lot to catalog.
The museum recently opened its new exhibition, Making It Home, From Vietnam to New Orleans, Mark Cave is a senior historian and conceived the idea for this exhibit a decade ago.
Our approach was just to reduce everything to the stories, the life of the people and what they experienced. They searched their entire life for a home. They found it here in New Orleans.
Cave says the exodus out of Vietnam left its mark on the city of New Orleans. This exhibition, he says, is a tribute to survivors of that journey.
They influenced everything in our city's culture, from cuisine to the fishing industry itself. In so many ways, they've helped create what New Orleans is today.
Through video, photos, and even clothing, the exhibit offers a window into the lives of Vietnamese refugees in New Orleans.
What amazed me about the Vietnamese interviews is just how much a human being can go through in their life and still come out the other end and thrive.
In one display case is a photograph and shoes belonging to Saran Bynum. Orphaned in Vietnam, she was airlifted to the U.S., and a New Orleans couple adopted her.
I was left on the street. I was laying in dirt. And then, now God blessed me to be here. And there's a reason. And it's the only reason why I'm here is to inspire other people.
The historic New Orleans collection also documented the Vietnamese's journey in audio form. At this table, you'll find some of the refugee stories. There's Joseph Gao, the first Vietnamese-born U.S. congressman.
Growing up was quite uneventful, a regular childhood where you play games, you attend school, except for the occasional bombardments where we had to avoid.
There's also Cindy Wynn. And then there's also my family's story. In 1978, my family and I escaped Vietnam, drifting on a fishing boat for days, eventually landing in Thailand. We spent months in a refugee camp before coming to the U.S. Journalism brought me here to New Orleans, where today I'm firmly part of the story I'm telling. 50 years after the Vietnam War, that story is still being written.
I love America. This has been home for me, forever, but can't forget about Vietnam, where we came from.
In New Orleans, Tan Trung, Fox 8 Local First.